And the nation heard the Israeli Prime Minister's warning to Congress.
My friends, for over a year, we've been told that no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, this is a bad deal. It's a very bad deal.
And now lawmakers introducing a bipartisan bill requiring congressional review of any nuclear deal with Iran. But President Obama is threatening to veto that law. And last night we spoke about that with Senator Rand Paul. Good evening, sir.
Glad to be with you.
And there's news tonight that Senator McConnell, though, may opt not to put this bill on the floor.
Well, I think it's going to come to the floor, but I think the argument was, should it come to the committee first? I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think there are still a lot of questions. I've been saying all along that I think the law requires the undoing of sanctions that were put on by Congress. Obviously, the law would require that Congress would have to undo these, that he can't do this on his own. So it's been a big debate whether the president can undo sanctions on his own, and that's what this bill will be the discussion about, is that Congress really should have to approve of an agreement.
All right, the Republicans have given the president a lot of heat over executive orders going alone and not going to Congress and having things resolved. Can you tell me why this agreement with Iran that the president is negotiating isn't a treaty, nation to nation, nuclear weapons as well as monitoring, much like the START treaty? And if it's a treaty, it should go to the Senate for advice and consent and a supermajority, 67 votes. Why isn't it going that way?
If it sounds like a treaty, looks like a treaty, why isn't it a treaty? I think it's a valid question, and it's a question I'll bring up. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and when it comes up, that's going to be the debate, because we are going to be debating how we will approve of this agreement. The interesting thing about it is most of the discussion has been whether the president gets to do it all by himself with no approval or not, and this is the debate we've been having with the administration. What we've been attempting to do is to at least codify in law that we will have to approve it. One, to give him strength to negotiate from a position of strength, knowing that any old agreement's not going to pass muster. But I think you make a good point. It's a point we'll bring up next week is this a treaty? What is a treaty? And let's have that debate.
Well, it's almost as though, and this, I can't figure out why this would not be a treaty, especially when you look at the very treaty the president proposed, negotiated, and had ratified by the Senate, the START treaty, during his presidency, obviously, is what I don't. I mean, this is like in one way, I would think that the Republicans might say this is sort of an international executive order. If the president thinks he can go alone without the Senate, and when the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 says that you must go to the Senate for a treaty.
And that's a good point, because we have had a problem over the last 100 years of a lot of powers being given up by Congress and taken by the presidency. And there's gotten to be this category of things they call agreements. The Democrats are maintaining that there should be no vote in Congress on this. The Democrats are uniformly opposed to, not uniformly, mostly opposed to the Corker bill, because they don't think the president should have any vote in Congress. And now the point you bring up is whether or not it should be a simple majority, like an agreement, or whether it should be similar to what a treaty is, which would be a 2/3 vote.
Of course, and so the whole thing is whether it's a treaty or not. All right, your thoughts on Prime Minister Netanyahu? What impact did he have?
I think a big impact, because it drew everybody's attention to and maybe broadened people's perspective on whether or not it's just about nuclear enrichment. He broadened the message, which is an important one, or broadened the question, which is maybe it should also be about them renouncing terrorism in the Middle East. Maybe it should be also about conventional weaponry, such as intercontinental ballistic missiles, that really it should be about an attitude. But I did like the fact that he said that the choice is not a bad deal or no deal. Maybe there could be a better deal, and that he wasn't opposed to negotiation, and that ultimately Israel, from his perspective, wants peace, and that we want peace. And I think that's an important message to continue to send, that we do want to negotiate. It's difficult to trust people who are your adversaries, and I think I acknowledge that as well. But I don't want this to be about ending negotiation and that the only alternative is war. And I think what I heard from Netanyahu is that continuing to negotiate and a better deal is better than a bad deal.
Senator, thanks, sir. And straight ahead, you ought to be